Some Ships.
Okay, everybody, welcome back to We Lost Some Ships, and it's episode 4, I guess, about Gottman.
Yes, episode 4, The Gottman Files.
That's right.
TV show.
Yes, love it.
Yeah. Oh boy, I tell you what, we have. Speaking of limiting tangents, we have a smelly fridge right now, and I just caught a whiff of it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not what you came here for, though.
It's okay. You kept that under 30 seconds.
Yes, I did. Yes. Okay.
But I will say, just as another tangent, when I first walked in, I just thought to myself, what died?
Yeah.
Something in the fridge died.
Yeah, okay. So if any of our roommates are listening to this and we haven't already talked to you, you're driving the women away by not addressing that smell.
That's right. Hopefully it will be addressed later. Hopefully.
Yeah, anyway, again, that's not why you're here. So part 4 of Gottman. This is research, John Gottman's research on predictors of divorce and ways to have just happier marriages. And we've applied that not just to marriages, but to relationships in general, as he does as well.
Yep.
We're drawing a lot of this from a video, which we'll include in the link or in the description. Also from his book, The Relationship Cure. Viviana, do you have something to say? You sound like you're poised to say something.
No, I was just meditating.
Fine.
I was just,
okay. You were meditating.
Lost in a zone,
That's good.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, but so Bryce, you're going to give us a little recap.
Oh
right?
yeah, you know I am.
Stuff we talked about last few
so we talked about ratios, positive to negative interactions in marriage. Obviously, the marriages that last. Not obviously, but not surprisingly. There's a 5-to-1 ratio, positive to negative, for the ones that last. There's a 0.8-to-1 ratio of positive to negative for marriages that end in divorce. In John Gottman's Love Labs research, where it was essentially these like especially intrusive bed and breakfasts, where it was just a nice bed and breakfast where they were also taking your blood and your heart rate and stuff like that, and
urine samples. Don't forget that.
That's right.
That's right.
So mostly a normal bed and breakfast. Anyway, the research doing that, they were able to pinpoint these clear predictors of divorce, which they call the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And with each of these 4, they found that people who were successful and stayed together, they were able to predict with like over 90% accuracy which ones would end in divorce and which ones wouldn't, within a certain time frame. I forget the exact time frame, but and they found that the ones that stayed together handled these 4 horsemen very differently, and so that's what they described as masters versus disasters. So these 4 horsemen, just going through the list, are 1, criticism, 2, defensiveness, 3, disrespect and contempt, and 4, stonewalling. And they found that disrespect and contempt was the strongest predictor of divorce. They found that the antidotes, where I should have said this from the get-go, but the antidote to criticism is to kind of kick the problem around in a more productive way, where you talk about yourself, your feelings, and what you need, rather than make it a personal attack on them. With defensiveness, it's to accept responsibility for your role in things. With disrespect and contempt, the antidote is to create a culture of affection and admiration, which is to be just more proactively communicating the positive and noticing the positive in the other person. And then with stonewalling, it's to listen to each other and build on each other's bids, which we're going to talk today about bids, by the way.
That's true.
Well,
Viviana had an interesting thing about stonewalling that you were listening to, right? About women stonewalling versus men. Yeah, kind of interesting.
80% of stonewallers are men?
Yeah.
Is that what the stats say?
Yeah.
That men are more likely to stonewall?
Yep.
And women are more likely
sense.
to criticize?
Yeah, okay. So men are more likely to stonewall, women more likely to criticize. Yep.
Please continue your uninterrupted thought.
Good to know.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
That is completely just...
No, it's all right.
Yeah, that's exactly what the lady said. that men are more likely to be stonewallers and women are more likely to criticize.
Not surprising.
Yep.
Not surprising to me, just based on what I've read. I know I talk a lot about Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman, but it was a very useful book, and that was one of my big takeaways from it, is just the physiology behind what stresses us out. And for men, the threshold of tolerance for negativity is much lower than it is for women. So we get flooded, we get stressed out.
Yeah.
And they talked about it in this other video you're listening as well. But we get stressed out easier.
I know this is tangential, but I wonder if that's why there are more men, criminals, homicide, murderers.
Because they get stressed out. For sure, that's a part of it.
Because of that flooding and that physiology.
For sure. That I think that is a huge factor in why people have altercations with the police.
Yeah, I mean,
that ends terribly.
They're more disagreeable on the Big Five. Like, they're higher in disagreeability.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, before we jump into bids, though, I thought, so our church has...
Oh, I'm not ready to go there.
Oh, you're not? Okay. You still doing your
go
recap.
On.
Well, you can finish your recap, and then I can jump in. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. All right.
Off in the middle
okay. So those were the four horsemen. And then we started talking about friendship, which is just another component of healthy relationships. And in Gottman's research, they boiled it down to 3 components. And by the way, by friendship we mean it's like intimacy between two people, and it's useful not just for the enjoyment, the relational enjoyment, but it also helps to maintain conflict, which we'll talk about another time. But anyway, so one, they talk about love maps, which is basically understanding the other person, understanding their hopes and dreams, their fears, what excites them, what bores them, what's important to them. And that's something that we do need to work to build and ask open-ended questions and periodically update it. I was trying to apply this with my own family recently, and I it's good. John Gottman helped me because I was able to say, hey, we're asking how each other is doing. Let's try to ask some more open-ended questions, and it was valuable. Okay. Anyway, so there's that. There's the second component of friendship is fondness and admiration. This is very similar to the culture of affection and respect or appreciation. And it's very much about the daily small things. The small evidences that you care and respect the person. And fundamentally, it's about communicating those. Okay. And then lastly, responding to bids, which we're going to talk a lot about today.
But first, I think Paul wanted to add something.
Yeah, I just want, so with regards to the love maps, so like our church had general conferences last weekend, right? A couple times I thought about some of this Gottman stuff in some of the talks. So there was a talk by Michelle Craig, and she talked about getting to know people deeply. I don't remember if you guys read that part.
Was this in the Saturday morning session?
That's a good question. I can't remember which session it was.
Okay, that's okay. Because I might have listened to it recently.
But anyway, she talked about getting to know people deeply. How the Savior got to know people deeply.
Yeah.
And she was talking about that. And then Elder Oaks, he was talking about
love your enemy.
He talked about loving your enemies. He quoted the musical or some song from a play or something, Getting to Know You. I can't remember what it's from.
Was it from Oklahoma? I feel like Oklahoma's gotten a lot of time in general conference over the years.
Oklahoma or West Side Story.
I think President Monson, just in his long ministry, frequently referenced it. Anyway,
Oklahoma.
Go ahead.
Why not? Oklahoma and The Economist. Those are his sources.
Oh, and David Brooks gets referred a lot, which I appreciate. I like David Brooks.
Yeah. Okay. And so, but anyways, the note I wrote down was we should get to know others, seek to understand them, even learn from them, and seek to understand the power of love. Anyways, it just reminded me of the Gottman stuff of like both of those concepts and both of those talks kind of reminded me of the Gottman concept of just the love map, really getting to know people, actually getting to know them, knowing them deeply kind of thing.
Yeah.
That actually reminded me of Jordan Peterson and how he talked about how we should never be so arrogant as to assume that we can't possibly learn anything from any other human being, no matter how small. And I think that there's a lot to that. I think when we just appreciate people for who they are, we are happier as a whole.
Go ahead. I also think when you're arguing with an enemy, you need to ask them a question and say, now I'm asking this question so I can keep building my love map of you, because that really helps to diffuse
because it's non-existent right now.
It really helps to diffuse an enemy type situation.
And if we're talking about the opposites, like since the last time we recorded, I think there's been 2 political debates. The first of which was a disaster, regardless of your anyone can interpret things how they want, but I think most people think it was just very, very painful to watch, regardless of who you're rooting for. In politics, you have to build a hate map, right? I mean, so often this is the tactic used, right? You're finding out what are the pain points, what are the ways we can make them look bad.
Yep, that's exactly what they're doing. They're looking for pain points.
Another completely uninterrupted thought.
Exactly.
But yeah, it's like these political operatives, these people who work in politics, like their job is to dig up the dirt, right? To find connections of people who could say something bad. They're doing their research. They're asking, I don't know if they're asking open-ended questions, but for sure they're trying to create a picture of how they can spread hate about the other person. So it's kind of evil. It's kind of the opposite, but it's kind of the world of politics.
It is the opposite of love maps. Well, I mean, it is true. You're trying to build up all the worst stuff about somebody.
Yeah.
Sure, when you're building up a love map of somebody, you're trying to figure out the bad stuff about them too, but you're trying to fully understand them. Good and bad, a full, complete picture. You're trying to really get to know them well, for a good purpose though, so that you can love them better, not so that you can, defeat them in a debate and make them look bad or whatever. Yeah. So, anyways, moving on to bids, right?
Oh yeah.
So let's talk about bids. Bids are essentially bids for connection, where a person says something. And what they're really kind of hoping for is for someone to respond to that bid. And so what the Gottman research shows is that there's different types of responses to bids. There's turning towards bids, where if you say like, hey, I'm going to go do yoga, the turning towards bid would be like, yeah, that's awesome, And then
yoga, more like, yeah, go.
That would be an example of an enthusiastic turning towards.
I'm never going to say that to anyone. Don't worry. Very
punny, No. Good job. Very punny.
Go on, please.
Another enthusiastic.
Let's forget this ever happened.
You could also, another example of enthusiastic turning towards, you could also say something like, oh, that'll be so awesome. I think that's great. Go do that, Then there's turning away bids, and then there's turning against bids. The turning away bid would be like, oh, and they just don't say anything in response. It's almost as if, in a way, they're kind of just like dismissing what you even had to say in the first place. And a turning against bid would be like, yeah, you need to do yoga because you're so stressed out. Or they might say something snarkier, that's even more offensive, where they're like, yeah, you've been really paranoid, so you better get
yoga. Like, I need you to make me a sandwich.
It could be that too.
Yo, get me a sandwich.
All those are examples. Okay. But these bids, it's really interesting because John Gottman's research, initially he said that when he was doing research on marriage, he said that what he found, what he initially assumed when he started his research, was that the marriages that actually were the best marriages, if he could call it that, were actually the ones that had deeper they had deeper, longer discussions about themselves, which is kind of like the idea of enhancing love maps.
Yeah.
However, he said that his research revealed another thing. While his clients were in the love labs, he would look at the way that they interacted. In addition to having someone, being strapped, having like technology strapped around their around their chest to kind of get like
your heartbeat and all that stuff.
heartbeat and like physiological responses, in addition to getting blood samples and urine samples from his people. He had other people actually in another room taking data on how couples would respond to their partners. Would you smile when you're would one person in the relationship, would they smile when the other person was speaking? How would they respond? Would they look away? What faces would they make? Because we're always communicating, whether we think we're communicating or not. We might not have said anything, but we're always communicating. And so that's what's really interesting about this bid, like these bids, is like how is the person responding to that bid? I know I'm guilty of not responding to some bids, and I need to do better at that, and I was just telling Paul that sometimes I'm like, I intellectually understand this Gottman stuff, but I am not always applying it. And so,
which is true of all people.
Yeah, true of all people.
Yeah, absolutely. We probably should give a little bit of a few examples of, because we kind of talked about what a bid is. It's a bid for attention, but there's a whole bunch of different ways in which this happens, right? Yeah. Like I remember one of the examples in the book is where the wife says something like, "Look at that pretty boat," and it's just a statement about a boat, but it's a bid because it's a bid for attention, right? She wants to talk with her husband about something. And so there's a whole bunch of other examples too, of like what constitutes a bid, because basically anything where you're.
I mean, naturally, I think about this most in a dating context, and there, bids are happening all the time, and bids are getting ignored all the time too.
Absolutely.
I can't count how many women. I mean, so much of my dating these days is on Mutual, the premier LDS dating app. But
thank you for your ad support in the future.
Yeah, I hope so. But like getting ignored is like the norm.
Yeah.
And now that they've added the feature, which is common in most messaging services, but like where you can see if they've seen your message, then you know which ones are like have just like deleted the app or gotten a boyfriend or just don't care anymore, and which ones have actually seen you and have probably made a decision. I'm not saying there couldn't be some but probably they made a decision. I'm not going to respond to this person.
Sure. Well, Viviana,
I liked his face.
Yeah.
And now I realize that's all I liked, and it was only momentary.
That's hilarious. The reason why bids are so important is because the research says that the chances of rebidding is almost zero. He said it's zero in couples who wound up divorcing and 0.22%, I guess, in couples who stay together. Yeah. So there's a big chance that if you make a bid for connection or a bid for attention, there's a big chance that the person that you're dating, if you ignore them that first time, there's a big chance that they're probably not going to rebid again.
Not that same bid.
Not
anyways,
the same bid. Absolutely.
And they're gonna get, if there's a pattern of like basically what you're talking about. What Gottman was finding is if there's a pattern of like not responding to bids, then that relationship is going down the tubes.
Yeah. I do think probably like it's a little bit different. The dynamic is different in the dating world.
Yeah.
I think rebidding is more likely in that case where at least one person is still really trying. I think in marriages where they're not responding to bids, that's where it's become a real habit. Not say that we can't have habits even as single people, but
yeah. Although even in a dating context, you probably would agree that if someone's not responding to your bids, like it's a bad sign. It's a red
for
flag,
sure,
right? Like
for
you're
sure.
Thinking, like there's either lack of interest or
yes. Now, if you're a glutton for punishment,
probably,
like me, or you become smitten with girls who aren't giving you enough like attention and like basic,
they're not responding to your bids,
but I really like them, especially, and this is actually something that I learned in as a psychology undergrad, but the whole behaviorism, right? Like you if you give a dog a treat or whatever on a routine schedule and to elicit a certain response, you actually get the most of a desired behavior when your reward is
intermittent.
Exactly.
Intermittent. It's called intermittent ratio.
Okay.
Or it's called variable ratio.
Okay,
yes,
yeah.
that's the
So
word.
it's not that you're never getting a reward. It's that it's very uncertain.
Well, and that's what slot machines. That's how they make all their money because you bid one, you do the action one time, you know, and you don't get money, and then sometimes it takes like 7 times, sometimes it takes 700 times. You never know when you're going to get a response, and so that's why there's the research in psychology is clear in that that type of variable ratio is the one that leads to higher response. Yeah. But this is again a tangent. So.
It is a tangent. An interesting one, and not a flippant one.
Yeah.
Listeners, you may have noticed we're trying to really rein in our tangents so that they're we're just trying to rein them in a little bit.
Boy, are we doing a good job at anyway. So but you're saying that you have a lot of you talk to a lot of people who are not responding to bids in a dating app. And
yes, in a dating context.
Probably because in your profile you say no need to respond to bids.
Yes, I'm a nice guy. I don't need you to treat me with respect.
Yeah, exactly.
No. But can I just say something else about bids and how they if you're not responding, the research is clear that you're going to weaken that bond. You know, you're destroying a relationship when you have either turning against or turning away bids.
Yeah. And there's a difference between somebody who's like engrossed in something. Like me and Bryce go through this a lot. I think,
we do.
Because
all the time.
Oftentimes, we from both sides, because I'll be working on something and Bryce will come to our room.
Paul works at home as a patent attorney.
That's right. Visit pauljohnsonlaw.com if you need help with your intellectual property.
There we
Patents
go.
or trademarks. Thanks for the commercial. Anyways, and so I'll be working, and Bryce will kind of trying to be chatting with me. He'll try to be chatting with me, and if I'm working on something kind of intense, it's hard for me to focus, and then sometimes he'll ask, "Are you in extreme focus mode?" And I'll be like, "Yep," and then he won't talk to me, and then conversely,
but my feelings aren't hurt. I understand. Yeah.
And similarly, sometimes Bryce will be he'll be focused on something, reading something. And I'll be kicking around in the front room, asking questions, and he won't be making that much. He's you know. But then other times when we're not doing that, we're responding really well to each other's bids. So there's a difference between just being busy or being focused on something and intentionally ignoring something. I think, right?
But that being said, though,
it's still a bid,
whatever the
though,
reason,
right?
you're still not responding to a bid, but.
So,
hopefully responsible adults can recognize the difference and adjust accordingly.
Well, and that's that's kind of what our question was last time was, should you always respond to a bid? Because I gave some situations in which I don't always respond to bids. I know I'm guilty of not responding, if someone is asking you to go on a date on an app and you're not interested in the person, should you always say, I'm sorry, I'm not interested, or should you just, ghost them or breadcrumb them or whatever, Okay,
breadcrumbing.
You know that.
Say, I'm busy this week.
Yeah.
And then say nothing else but that. Leave it very vague.
Breadcrumbing is another term for variable ratio.
Okay.
So reinforcement.
You do occasionally give encouragement.
Yeah, that's what you're kind of leaving a trail of breadcrumbs.
I am susceptible to breadcrumbing. Boy.
But that's the thing.
I'm trying not to be.
Did you take calculus, Bryce, in school?
I did. It was one of my least successful subjects. I mean, I did fine, but I sure didn't understand. Well, I understood it ish. Go on.
This is a tangent to you a little bit, but I was talking with Viviana before we started recording about what the area under a curve.
Oh yeah.
And whether or not because it's more acute pain if you reject someone directly outright initially.
Yeah.
As opposed to kind of dragging them on. But my question was whether the area under the curve,
of pain,
whether the overall pain, is greater when you drag it on and are more trying to be more kind about it over time, whereas just being direct and getting it over with.
It's a good question, and probably the direct one is probably less total pain.
That's my thought. It's
Absolutely.
more acute initially, but anyways.
Do we want to talk about what we did today earlier?
We do,
as far as
yet.
Not yet. Okay.
But to your question, I think in the dating context where the commitment is not there, because again, I've said this before, but the process of dating is a process of appropriately building trust and commitment. And what's his name? in his relationship attachment model talks about this, but it's like it's a step-by-step process of growing your trust and your commitment in a person.
Jonathan Van Epp.
Jonathan Van Epp. So, the reality is, and you're gradually increasing the level of commitment with a person. Mm-hmm. So if the person can't commit to even like respond to a message, it's a bad sign, right? If they can, then the next step, can they commit to giving you their phone number, or, if if we start on an app, or going on a date. Of course, that's one of the essential ones.
How much you know them depends on how much you should trust them, and you should always know them more than you should trust them.
That's right, and you should trust them more than you've committed to them.
And you should trust them more than you've committed to them. And you should
touch them even less than
you've committed,
right? And in our modern dating world, it's loco. It's in commotion. People will sleep with people they don't know or like, or they'll commit to people that they don't really. That they can't rely on,
they can't rely on
the whole gamut. So one thing I thought also about bids is how sometimes, because Viviana and I actually respectfully disagreed a little bit beforehand talking about this, because she was saying that like everything is a bid, and I thought everything.
I was saying.
Sorry, I'm misrepresenting you.
Can I say, I said that everything that are the four horsemen of the apocalypse is actually, I wouldn't say it's a bid, but it could be a response to a bid, is what I probably meant to say. Yeah. So criticism is probably a response to a bid.
Well, criticism is a bid gone wrong, kind of.
It could be a bid, but it could also be a response to a bid.
For
Defensiveness could also be a response to a bid.
Yeah.
And so can contempt, and so can stonewalling.
Yeah. And my thought was, well, sometimes I'm asking for information. Like this happened this week on Facebook for me. I'm asking for information. I'm not looking for an emotional connection. I'm not looking for advice even. I'm not looking for you to cry tears. But often that is the response you get, because social media is an imperfect medium, and it's with people that most of whom you don't really have a real relationship with. So their love map with you is not up to date, if it ever existed in the first place, right? Mm-hmm. And so and this is a tangent, but just for a little context, I was asking. I was curious to compare my notes with other single men specifically, which is what I said.
What
was
the
comment.
Question that you asked it on Facebook?
I mean, to paraphrase, it was, what is it that's most challenging or frustrating or demoralizing for you in the dating process? I specifically asked it to single men. Initially, I even said if you're a woman, please refrain from commenting. But if you do, try to be respectful and humble and understand that. You're not the expert on this particular topic. Not surprisingly, disappointingly for sure, but not surprisingly, from the get-go, I had 3 female friends comment, and one male friend, and it's I don't know, just the whole thing. It was frustrating, and it made me feel like, wow, you really. I recognize part of it is just me. I'm kind of a social scientist, just. All over the place. So I was prying for a little bit of information. Yeah. I wasn't looking for tears or commiseration per se. I was looking to compare notes to compare, is my experience similar to other men, which I found it is. But anyway. But it's some women took it personally and got defensive right off the bat to a question I wasn't even posing to them. Some women quibbled with the question and the framing and all that, and those are understandable. But at the end of the day, it's I wasn't looking for an emotional connection, and so many of you made this an emotional thing. And whether or not you were bidding for attention, which I think some of it was, it's that's not what I wanted. I didn't want to make an emotional connection. I wanted a compartmentalized male information gathering.
Yeah, I saw that post, but I was like, yeah, I know.
And it's not to say that people's emotions are unimportant. Right. It's just that's not what I personally was wanting.
Yeah.
Facebook's a weird venue. Social media is a weird venue for that kind of a conversation. I think that it's because I saw your question, and I was like, I have thoughts to this question. I just don't want to put them on social media.
And I even mentioned like partway through, like, hey, ladies, I love you, but please don't comment, unless you absolutely feel a need and you think it would contribute, and it's not just you being, protecting your emotions or your interests, but like, the more eyes, the more judginess, the more perception of judginess there is, and more eyes there are on this, the less likely I am to get an honest male response. So, and I was right.
So did you get any private male responses on how many messages?
I got, let's see, I got at least 2 from men that were what I was looking for. And I got at least 1 from a woman that is not what I was looking for. Okay. Even though I'm not saying she's not an important person, and I'm not saying her emotions aren't important, but it's not what I personally was looking for.
Okay.
So, but
according to the boundaries that I had tried to set, which I'm finding boundaries are very hard to set in social media. People are impervious to them.
Well, I knew that one. I mean, I think of like all the Kim Kardashian, drama, all the drama with all the celebrities on all the social media. Yeah, boundaries are definitely not hard to set on social media.
They are hard to set.
They're definitely. Sorry, I meant to say they are hard to set. Yes.
Like, to me, social media sometimes seems like, when you're driving in your car and you're behind the safety of those windows, you can be really mean to people.
Yeah. Exactly,
and you can do stuff that you wouldn't do in person.
In person,
you can say things that you
absolutely.
wouldn't say in person.
Yeah.
And
to be completely fair, I also ask questions that I'm probably not as comfortable to ask in person. Not necessarily. I mean, in general, I'm a pretty open guy, but I'm not immune to that effect either.
Sure.
Right? Yeah.
So we're getting off on a little bit of a tangent here, but you were pointing out that you're relating this to bids in the sense
not
that
everything is a bid for emotional connection.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
So,
although they are very important,
but we were talking about maybe being direct, and we just kind of also were talking about how important it is just to be direct in our when we make bids. It's important to be direct, and when we respond to bids, it's also equally important to be direct. Is that what you were saying, Paul, as well?
And with the directness, I was specifically talking about like rejection, like if you need to reject a person, because Viviana, you had brought up the question about like when is it okay to not to respond to a bid, and it seemed like mostly this seemed like in the context of you're getting a bid from someone that's kind of an unwelcome bid, or it's someone who you don't reciprocate their interests, and so you're trying to figure out, do I need to even say anything back, or is it better for me to just not say anything and let them go their way, kind of thing. And so that's kind of mostly what I was talking about.
I just had a hypothesis popping into my mind, is that maybe this the fact that, well, I don't know if it's a fact. I suppose women probably women do rank more high on agreeableness in the Big Five personality, which we'll talk about someday. I think they probably have a relatively harder time rejecting people because they feel bad about it. And they're more commonly in a position where they have to be the one to reject, because a man will pursue any living woman who's sufficiently attractive to him, right? Regardless of suitability or anything. So it's like,
at least temporarily.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I wonder if this causes women to be more selective from the get-go, and to look at all the clues they can, because which I think they do anyway, in dating apps anyway.
Yeah, perhaps. Although I do like when you were talking. What you were saying there with regards to whether women are more likely to be kind of soft in their rejections, that may be true. Although when I've been on the rejector side, where I have to reject a girl, it's also
sucks too.
It's super hard for me too, and I
hate
also have the tendency to do the exact same thing, and to like make up some excuse.
You're more agreeable, and so am I. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm more agreeable, so maybe if I was less agreeable,
you're like, I don't like you. The end.
Perhaps. I'm pretty high on agreeable. But yeah, it's true. Like, it's hard for me too. My tendency is just the same as like what I've gotten from women who have rejected me. It's just like if there's an excuse that I can validly use, that's usually my first option. And very rarely will I bring out the big guns and say like, I'm just not interested in that way. I have done it a few times. Yeah. And with mixed responses, sometimes girls have taken that pretty well, and other times they've like kind of gotten upset.
Now, I would say that the more deep your connection has gotten, the less appropriate it is to just ghost them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well.
But of course, the corollary to that is if you don't have a deep connection, it's more okay to ghost someone, right?
I don't know. I think I'm gonna work on trying to be more direct when it comes to bids.
Yeah.
We're responding to unwanted bids.
Okay, but
I'll say
even
that.
if a guy's like, "Yo, you're cute," and this is the first time you've interacted, if you're gonna say, "I'm sorry, I'm not interested in you. I swiped up on you. I reconsidered." Based on this very scant information.
They say,
Well, Bryce,
they say you're
since
cute.
you phrase it that way, I think you're probably right. I probably would just ghost. I'm
Yeah.
so sorry.
Well,
I'm
it's
so
hard.
sorry, John Gottman.
We hate it.
It is hard
but
because you
he
don't have.
wasn't talking about this.
But he was
He was talking about marriage, which is a different
Yeah,
context.
it is a little bit
Go
different.
on.
It's true.
Okay.
I think your response, they say you're cute, I think your response should be, thank you. I wish that you were, but I guess you can't have everything. And then you just see how it goes. But no, that's a bad response. But you do bring up a good point because, like, you know, a bid like that from a total stranger is a different thing than a bid from like your spouse
Yes.
or someone
Absolutely.
you're dating. You know, and it's
Absolutely.
like,
Very
well,
different.
and I mean, you kind of expect to some extent in the dating world that some of your bids are going to be totally ignored because both
Some.
genders get
What
that.
about the majority?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. Perhaps
When
the
I
majority.
wonder,
But I agree.
to
Yeah.
what degree do you? So we've been also talking about like emotional heritage, and like how the
we
way.
haven't yet.
Well, we haven't, but
we should.
before, yeah, we're. I guess we're gonna start talking about that, right? Yeah. Okay.
good
So, the way that our family responds to our bids,
Yeah.
I wonder how it colors
Responded.
or responded
Right.
to our
Oh,
bids.
well, it could be
yeah.
present
It
tense
could
as
be
well.
present tense.
Yeah, family of origin. You know, you're,
I wonder the emotional heritage that comes with our family's emotional philosophy in regards to bids. I wonder how that colors our view, right? Like, let's say a person had maybe person A had like 50% of their bids responded to, you know, maybe person, you know, B had like 100% of, or maybe not 100, but maybe 90% of their bids. How would that actually influence that person, and how would that influence the way that they date? I'm curious about that. But I also know that there's a point at which you can't 100% just say, you can't blame everything on your environment and say, oh, well, the reason why I don't bid today, you know, or respond to bids today is because of my past. 100%. No, at one point you have to take accountability for your responses.
yeah, it's probably true though that people who had more responses to bids in their childhood probably have healthier self views.
Yes.
You know, and they're probably more likely to I would guess they're probably less likely to be anxious, to have anxious attachment styles in relationships.
Yeah.
And they're probably more likely to speak up when they see something, you know, is wrong and speak up for themselves. You know, I need this kind of thing. But that's just my guess. But
This is the kind of topic that I definitely want to talk more about in other episodes, but just how far-reaching the consequences are for our family of origin. It's huge. It's not, like you said, it's not the only thing. Especially the longer we go, the older we get. Like, on the one hand, if you're unaware of how, you know, your family environment shaped you, then it is important. It's very important to investigate that and understand that, to understand where you are now and why things are the way they are. I've been going through a lot of that in my life. But you know, the more you've grappled with that and you're aware of it, the more incumbent it is on you to, like, hey man, it's your life.
Yeah.
Like, do something.
So maybe,
but both
you know,
of those are so important. Like, so, you know, and this is, I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
It's agency. Go ahead. Keep
Yeah.
going. Yeah.
You know, and this is why, like the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, they very, very appropriately put so much emphasis on healthy families. It's the there are a few things that give people a better or worse chance in their temporal success, and I think also their spiritual success, right?
Yeah.
Than good, righteous, loving, wise, disciplined, forgiving, patient parents. And, this is clear in the social science research as a public policy guy. This is me talking, that the family structure is strongly correlated with all sorts of things, for better or for worse. I mean, there's still a lot we don't understand, but, it's very clear, intact biological families are pretty much the gold standard. Doesn't mean that other forms of family can't also be healthy and good, but if we want to, maximize the chances for good outcomes, it starts with the intact biological family. And naturally, this is something that the adversary, sorry, maybe we're on a tangent here, but this is something the adversary, we know, is fighting tooth and nail against this. And he's making a lot of progress, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But it can be fought with agency.
Sure, and I think that's a part of the Gottman research too, is that if your family falls apart, that's bad. It's bad for your kids. I mean, and I think some of the stuff it's you can change some of this stuff, right?
Yeah.
If you're not responding to your spouse's bids or the bids of the person that you're in a relationship with, then you can do something about that,
right?
And you can change. You can maybe turn things around,
right?
Turn the ship around.
What was really interesting to read about was how he says that bids don't always have to be such a formal thing. Responding to bids don't always have to be such a formal thing. He talks about how this one man...
Madam, I respectfully reply to your request for a bid.
Yeah,
Sincerely yours.
They talk about how this one spouse, this one man, he came in and he greeted his wife and he basically tapped her shoulder and tapped her head, and then she literally turned around and did the same thing, and that was the response to the bid.
Right.
Very simple.
And
sweet.
Bids could be anything. It could be a gesture. It could be a wink. It could be it's the body language. It could be a hug. It could be
a wink. I don't do enough winks in my life.
Yeah, you need to. Come on.
I do lots of them in emoji form.
Bryce does super exaggerated winks, ding, like that. And I think you actually make the ding noise.
I mean, my emojis look like everyone else's emojis.
Are you talking about the one with the tongue hanging out,
Oh no, I'm talking about in real life.
I've gotten away from using that emoji. I find it too ambiguous.
It's incredibly ambiguous. Yeah.
That emoji.
The winking with the tongue out.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure.
I would say I agree with you. A lot of these bids are just nonverbal, but I would also say that if it's verbalized, that's especially important not to ignore.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's true. A lot of times, you and me both, even though we're, no, what's the word I was looking for? Even if we're doing something by ourselves, we like to have ambient people around.
Yeah.
And I kind of think that's
similar personalities
a little bit of a bid too. You want people around.
Yeah, you want to feel vaguely connected to people around you. It's like for slightly introverted extroverts, which is what we are. I mean, I think you more than me, but right. It's I want to be around people. I also want my privacy and alone time, at least while I'm working. And I think that's what it is a lot for me. Is when I'm working, I don't want it to be alone, and I think that's a clear sign I'm an extrovert. Go on.
Yeah, sure. No, but I was just pointing out that even when you're wanting to be in the same room with a person, it's kind of it's a little bit of a bid. You're opening yourself. It's true. It's kind of a very passive bid, but it's not the same as
it's a non-bid bid.
Yeah,
because you're not bidding, but you're still bidding.
Yeah,
I got you.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyways,
do we want to talk a little bit about the 4 different philosophies?
Yeah. So do you want to talk about
family coaching or the family philosophies?
That's right.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah. Sure. So there were 4 philosophies.
We have about maybe 5 minutes.
Yeah, sure. There were there's these 4 emotional philosophies in families, right? And so about how families, and this is mostly based on your parents, how your parents tended to respond to your, is it bids?
Bids, absolutely.
Bids? But it's mostly how they respond to bids related to negative emotions. Mostly,
it could be any emotion.
Just emotion.
Okay.
Because that's what bids are, right? It's
it could be
bid
a bid
for emotional connection.
Yeah.
Sure. And so there's this test we went through. It was I don't know. We answered a certain number of questions.
13 of them.
And it had it was like you're sad about something. Like, for example, you're sad that your dog died, and you say something about it, and how your parent responds. You know,
Yeah, that's a good example. Why don't you read them?
Yeah, what do you got it there?
I have
the
them.
dog one.
So your dog Shortstop died.
Yeah, it's a dog. It was named after baseball position.
And you're sad. So they want you to choose which of these was most descriptive of your parents. The A is, we'll get a new dog. B is, I'm really sad too. I've been thinking all day about the funny things Shortstop would do. Maybe it would be nice to gather some of our photos that he's in and make us a Shortstop scrapbook. B is, I'm really sad too. Shortstop was a good dog. D was, I hate to break it to you, kid, but he was just a dog. And
walking around
like a sad sack all day isn't going to bring him back.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so these are like different styles.
Yeah.
So the way you categorize the different styles is, the one style is emotion dismissing. You know, like, you'll get over it.
We'll just get a new dog. That's dismissing. Yeah.
Cheer up. And so how this affects bidding is that leads to less bidding, because that's a turning away bid, turning away from a bid. Then another one is emotion.
You're not engaging with the person's emotion that they've expressed. You're just changing the subject.
Exactly. What they're not telling you,
Change the subject in a way that's maybe intended to be productive. Sorry, go on.
True, and what they're not telling you, the dog story, is that the first dog died before that, and its name was First Base. I mean, I can tell you what the name of the next dog is going to be. Anyways, okay. Then the next emotional philosophy is emotion disapproving. You know, that's where, like, the parent says, you shouldn't feel that way. You know, you better change your attitude.
Yeah.
That also leads to less bidding.
Yeah, it's a turning against response. And it's a hostility toward the expression of emotion.
Yeah, it's not as bad as turning away, emotion dismissing, right? But it's... No, sorry, it's worse. Emotion disapproving is worse than turning away.
Yeah, I mean...
That would be like, against. I hate to break it to you, kid, but that was just a dog. And walking around isn't going to bring him back. That was the emotion disapproving. Yeah.
Emotion disapproving, yeah.
And what's interesting, they say in the book that with this philosophy, you tend to frame relationships as power struggles.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's like you're trying to protect yourself from the unpleasantness and discomfort of emotions. And so, like, you know, speaking of boundaries, like, you're setting your boundaries. Like, you don't want... you don't want to talk about these things, and if someone tries to make you talk about it, we're going to fight about it.
So another thing with the emotion disapproving is they might see something as this kid is crying, they're crying for attention. That's, you know, they're just trying to overhaul and all the attention. So I'm just not going to respond to this kid.
Yeah,
you know?
like, I mean, it's kind of... I think it's kind of delusional, right? You view all these bids with extreme skepticism.
With extreme skepticism,
right? And you definitely won't empathize.
And what's sad is that with this type of responding, the kid is less likely to ask why. Why would a kid, if the parent said, "I hate to break it to you, but he was just a dog," like, why would the kid 100% like say like, "Oh, well, that was just a one time that my parents dismissed my emotions. I'm going to ask them again." You know, the kid would not say that.
Yeah. And
they would not attempt.
Naturally, you know, if this has been years of this, you know, philosophy playing out, you're probably going to adopt the same approach in your own relationships when you're older.
Or actually, I will say I did have a friend that had a lot of deeds in his when he did this, and he said, but he actually turned out a pretty positive person.
It's good. Because
again, agency, you get to choose what you want to.
Yeah, it's true, and not all these led to the same style. Like, for example, the next style is laissez-faire, where it's kind of like you respond to them, but you just say something like, "I understand how you feel," period, and you don't talk to them about like, "Oh, well, you don't coach them at all about their feelings," and this may or may not lead to more bidding. It's a turning toward, but without offering any guidance for coping.
That's right. Yeah.
And so when I was reading the thing, it was talking about how. A lot of people with laissez-faire approach, the approach in their family was something more like there was like a hostile environment in their family, and so they felt like it was as they in their adult life, it's like they feel more safe, like not confronting emotions and kind of being more passive about it or something.
Because even though their parents allow them to express their emotions, whatever emotions those emotions might be, they're still not coaching the child through those emotions. They're still not giving very specific things. Like a kid might say, "I'm sad,"
oh, I'm sorry you're sad. And then it just ends there.
Right?
Yeah.
Whereas a more coaching response is, tell me more about it, or
what would you like?
What would you like to do?
Or what would you like to do? You want to take a break for a few minutes,
Right.
and then do you want to read or do you want to watch TV?
Right.
You know, like
Yeah, like you help them talk through their emotions
Right.
and be like, oh, you feel sad and what.
Yeah.
And there's an interesting thing in here where I talked about how like the emotion. So yeah, the emotion coaching is the best emotional philosophy. It leads to more bidding. It's a turning toward, but also with guidance about coping.
Yeah.
You know,
and it can teach the kid how to self-soothe their own emotions, which is very important in this world today.
Yeah.
absolutely.
So according to the research, studies say that children in emotion dismissing families have similar problems as children from emotion disapproving families. They're not as capable of soothing when they get upset. They are more likely to have more trouble concentrating and picking up on social cues. They might have more behavior problems or academic failure.
Yeah. We better wrap this up because
Yep.
we got some stuff. But I just want to read this last thing. It talked about how coaching families, they believe in the value of all emotions. Like anger isn't bad.
Right.
Sadness isn't bad. They
Right.
see them as there are these emotions will help you. Like anger is a creative, motivating force. You know,
Yes.
it might help you change something. Sadness might be a sign that you need to make a positive change.
Yes.
Kind of thing. So emotion coaching families are good at realizing that all these emotions aren't bad. Anyways, we probably better wrap this up.
And I tell you what, I wish I'd understood that a long time ago.
Yeah.
Like especially about anger, which I always
Sure.
believed. Just gotta pretend it's not there because Jesus said, "Don't be angry."
Yeah,
But it's a
exactly.
little more complicated, right? Like emotions are a barometer for how we're doing. Anyway,
Yeah.
that's my final
Yeah.
thought.
Anyways,
Yeah.
so one final. Let's go around and do final thoughts, perhaps, and then.
Oh, he said his.
I just
Oh,
kidding.
you did.
Anger is
Okay.
Even anger is useful. All emotions are useful, but doing something productive with them is the most important thing, and that's why the emotion coaching philosophy is so good.
Yeah.
Right.
I think my final thought is even if you grew up with an emotional dismissing family or emotional disapproving family, you still have the agency to decide how you want to move forward in your life. I think that's really important. If there's something that speaks to your heart, go for it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Okay. Well, I think I've already given my thoughts, so let's just wrap it up.
Okay.
And,
Okay.
we'll see you next time, guys.
Thanks for joining in.
Okay. Bye.
If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing on iTunes or your favorite podcasting app and give us a rating. Thank you.